Part 201. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2001. At first, Chang Yu didn't realize that the woman who looked like a trafficker was a trafficker, and thought she was really Zhou Man's aunt, but she wasn't Man Bao's cousin. When she still couldn't figure it out, Man Bao kept tapping her hand while holding her hand. Chang Yu didn't know what it meant and wanted to ask, but Man Bao didn't ask her, so she kept holding back. The crowd was still crowding around, and the woman who was dragging them almost separated from them. Man Bao took the opportunity to whisper "human trafficker" in her ear, and then took the initiative to pull Chang Yukong by the elbow of a man. They drilled down, grabbed hold of the middle-aged woman who was about to part with them, and called out "Auntie." The middle-aged woman did not doubt it. On the one hand, it was because people were too deceived. Not to mention Zhou Man and the others were only in their teens. At first glance, they were little ladies who had not seen much of the world, those women who were already married. Also often turn a quasi-child. Of course, what was more important was that the crowd was crowded, and she almost fell unsteadily, so she was flustered and didn't have the energy to think about deeper things. At this time, she had no energy to think anymore. She was wrapped by Man Bao and Chang Yu and walked in the direction of the crowd, moving slowly, and it took 2/4 of an hour to walk a little faster. Seeing that there was an intersection in front of him, Man Bao's hand on her shoulder was slightly tilted, and the silver needle pinched on her finger pierced her neck. Man Bao asked in a low voice, "Where are you going? Tell me." After not hearing the sound, Man Bao remembered, "Oh, yes, you can't speak, then use your eyes to guide the way, hurry up." The middle-aged woman's eyes twitched, she didn't turn it for a while, and she didn't turn it if she didn't. Man Bao's left hand was still tugging at her wrist, and when she felt her pulse was so fast, she knew she was dishonest and really wanted to threaten her. A man squeezed over, he grabbed the woman and shouted in a rough voice, "Where are you taking your daughter? Do you know that the house is waiting for you? It's so messy here, I almost can't find it. It's your turn." The people who were still crowding around also glanced at them, then looked away and continued to walk forward. The middle-aged woman's eyes were straight, and she wanted to wink him, but when her eyes moved, she felt the needle in her neck go in, and she was too frightened to move. And the new man didn't look at her, he looked straight at the side with a blank face and tried his best to act blankly, but it was Chang Yu who looked strangely shocked. He didn't take it to heart, he saw his companion's hand and Zhou Man's dragged them together, while Zhou Man was dragging Chang Yu, thinking that she had smelled the medicine for them, so he followed in confusion, so he didn't care that they were so obedient, and he stretched out his hand to drag Chang Yu away. Dumb Man Bao dared to let her touch Chang Yu, and when he made a mistake, he stopped halfway in front of her. Seeing him looking over, Nyanyo shouted, "Uncle, go home." The man responded immediately and smiled, "Yes, go home, hurry up, the car is waiting in front, let's go." After speaking, they led them along the crowd and walked a little to the side, and they came to an intersection. There were guards guarding the intersection. They were irritably driving people out of the main street, hurry up, go forward, don't allow blocked here." The man nodded and said to the two yamen servants, the youngest found his wife and children. "Thank you, sir, for letting him go." Then he followed the crowd out for a short time, but pushed open a door to let them in. This is a small shop. It is obviously Mid-Autumn Festival, but only 2 red lanterns are hung in front of the door, and only 1 oil lamp is lit in the shop. It is dark and almost no one can be seen. The man didn't stop, looked back at them, and seeing that the two were honest, he led them back into a small courtyard, where there was a carriage. He said directly to the middle-aged woman, "Let them get in the car and give them some water. It's late at night, we'll go home from the city." The middle-aged woman can only move her legs now, but the needle on her neck has been sticking to her, which makes her very frightened. She thinks that the man is blind, and he can't even see the needle on her neck. Of course men can't see it. Even if it is Mid-Autumn Festival, there are many lights hanging outside, but can the night be compared with the day? Besides, there are still so many people outside, and there are yamen servants, where would he have time to stare at her neck? The needle is very thin, okay. Man Bao noticed that the middle-aged woman stopped for a while, and pushed her waist. She had no choice but to lift her foot and get into the car. Man Bao followed, and Chang Yu glanced at the yard and climbed up as well. As soon as they got in the car, the two of them were startled, because there were still two children lying in the car, a little girl, carved in pink and jade, very beautiful, the other was also a girl, older, but the clothes on her body were not very good. It was very dark in the car, but Man Bao and Chang Yu grew up eating well, even in the dark, their eyesight is also very good. It can be seen that the girl is dressed in shabby clothes, but her face is very good looking, and she will grow up to be a beauty in the future. At this point, both of them were lying with their eyes closed. Man Bao looked at the middle-aged woman, who was sweating coldly. The man outside the car pushed two baggages into the car, which was considered to be carrying things up, so he directly took the carriage out of the yard. But can drive. Man Bao didn't lift the curtain to see the road, and directly asked Keek to remember the route. There is nothing wrong with Keek, but it is worried that there is a problem with the host. It asks, are you really going to go with him? What if his accomplices are very powerful? Taking advantage of the fact that he is the only one now, and the child has also found it, he directly took out the electric rod she bought before and gave it to him, and he could stun people directly. However, Man Bao thought to himself, if he is an accomplice, did his accomplice also arrest someone? She glanced at the two unconscious children, and reached out to pour water from the kettle beside her. Tonight, the capital has opened 3 gates. Tonight on Mid-Autumn Festival, there are so many people, the county government will not close the city to find someone. Once they are out of the capital, trying to find their traces and the children who were taken away is like going to the sky. The merits and virtues of saving a life are infinite. I don't know how to pay it back. If I know it, I can't let them just take people away. Man Bao poured out a glass of water, and when Chang Yu saw it, he whispered, be careful of poison. Didn't you hear the man just said to feed them water? And the middle-aged woman on the side couldn't help looking at her, and couldn't help but be excited. However, Man Bao glanced at the middle-aged woman and winked at Chang Yu. She smelled the water and smelled a faint smell of sweating medicine, and then pinched the middle-aged woman's mouth, in her panic. Pressing a little on her front neck, she couldn't help opening her mouth, and then gulping down the water. Afraid that the effect of the medicine would not be enough, after all, the smell of Mongolian sweat medicine is quite mild, so she stretched out the cup. Chang Yu immediately held the pot and poured it for her, and the two fed her 5 cups. The woman was frightened from the beginning. When he rolled his eyes, he fell down as soon as his brain softened. What should I do? I want to add more, but time is tight. Forget it, see you at 10 o'clock, tonight is another night of staying up late. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2002. Man Bao helped her, put the person down on the car, and then reached out and pulled out the 2 needles from her body. It's all right now, there are only 2 of them awake in the car, but Chang Yu is so excited that she wants to fill her with water while holding the pot. Man Bao put away the needle and went to see the 2 girls. She reached out to feel their pulse and check their bodies. Except for some pinch marks on their wrists, the 2 of them were not injured. And the pulse is good, you should be able to wake up after an hour or 2. Obviously, they didn't dare to give them too heavy a drug, so as not to fool people. Man Bao didn't wake them up. At this time, they had a good night's sleep, which was the best for themselves and for her and Chang Yu. Man Bao gave Chang Yu a wink, and then she started digging things out in front of Chang Yu. Her face was tangled. In front of people, it was still Chang Yu. She didn't dare to bring out too many things, so as not to make people feel that the things didn't match what she could hide. So Man Bao's consciousness searched and searched in the space, and finally he touched his sleeve pocket and found a purse. Chang Yu looked at this purse curiously, not knowing what it was for. There were still people outside. Man Bao couldn't explain it, he just motioned for her to hold it, and then he took it out from his sleeve pocket and took out a big belly bottle, which looked like a medicine bottle. Chang Yu's eyes brightened when he saw it, and he couldn't help but leaned into her ear and whispered, "Is it the kind of medicine that makes people bleed at the smell?" Man Bao glanced at her and said, she would like to see where there is such a powerful medicine. She put the medicine bottle in her sleeve, and she could get it as soon as she took it out. Then she changed another sleeve and continued to take it out. She took out 2 white handkerchiefs, but Chang Yu touched it and found that the handkerchief was not only made of cotton, yes, it is also layered on top of one another, very thick. Who wears such a thick handkerchief on a hot day? Man Bao, however, didn't think it was thick enough, so he folded the handkerchief twice, then covered his mouth and nose to show her a demonstration. Chang Yu instantly looked at her other sleeve and raised her chin. Man Bao nodded, indicating that she guessed right, this is poison, and she has to cover her mouth and nose. Chang Yu immediately covered it with the handkerchief she gave. Man Bao tore off her hand, saying that he didn't need it now. Then she inserted her hand into her sleeve again, and Chang Yu watched with great interest, but this time she didn't take out anything, but Chang Yu always felt that her outer sleeve seemed to sink a little, and there should be something hidden inside. Man Bao just took out the electric rod in the space and put it in his sleeve. It was bought urgently when the king of Yazhu sent someone to check her house in Qilai village, but it has been unusable since then. Its quality is very good, and the power stone is very durable. With the frequency of her use now, she will not be able to use up the energy in it for 3 lifetimes, not to mention that this thing can be restored after being exposed to the sun, which is a bit more advanced than the air purifier she bought for Mingda. Man Bao touched her sleeves, feeling a little nervous, excited, in her heart. After all, she only used it once. When she used it, she was young and not very sensible, so she threw it out. Just thinking about it, the carriage is getting faster and faster, and now Man Bao can't help but quietly open the curtain and look outside, seeing that there are fewer and fewer people outside, and now I don't know where I have entered. There are no lanterns on both sides of the road, only there are red lanterns hanging in front of a few houses. Chang Yu also leaned in to take a look. Seeing that the outside world was completely unfamiliar, she felt a little flustered, and she couldn't help but look at Man Bao. Man Bao looked very calm, and asked Keek in his heart, "Where is this?" According to the map, this is Changelfang, and going further is Daozhenfang. It was still in the inner city, but why did you come this way? Man Bao suddenly remembered, and she lowered her voice and asked Chang Yu, "Did Daozhenfang have a gate out of the city in the past?" Chang Yu said, "Chunming Gate? It won't be open tonight. Even in the Mid-Autumn Festival, the gates of the capital are not fully open, only 3 are open, the Ming Gate in the south, the Yangzing Gate in the east, and the Yanping Gate in the west. How many soldiers can guard the door?" Just as they were wondering if they were going out of the city gate, the carriage slowed down, and the two immediately dared not communicate any more, and quietly looked out through the curtain. I saw 2 cars parked in front, and 5 people squatted in front of the car. When they saw their car approaching, the 5 got up and said in a low voice, "Second son, why are you so late?" The man driving their car said, "It should have come out long ago, but there are too many people on the main street, and people can't move at all. It's good to be able to come out." "How many people did you bring?" "We'll find them tonight. 4 of them, 2 of which can also appear directly, are of the highest quality." The carriage stopped. Chang Yu heard these words, gritted her teeth with hatred, but she was also a little scared. She wasn't very scared of 1 or 2 people, but with so many, she might not be able to beat them. So she looked at Man Bao. Man Bao had already grabbed the purse from her hand, opened it, poured out 2 balls, and put one in her mouth. She held it, opened her mouth to let Chang Yu watch it, and signaled her not to swallow it. Just put one in her mouth. Chang Yu, who was holding on to her curiosity, instantly widened her eyes, and her whole face became bitter, but after looking at Man Bao, she still didn't spit it out. Man Bao gestured for the handkerchief in her sleeve, then looked at the car door. The man who happened to be chatting with his companions outside the carriage saw that there was still no movement in the carriage, so he called out irritably, "Sun Yang, what are you doing in there? Come out quickly." Seeing that there was still no movement, he stepped forward to lift the curtain, and then stuck his head in. The whip he was holding in his right hand was immediately grabbed by someone, and he saw the 2 Zhou men sitting at the door and Sun Yang lying behind them. He immediately realized that something had happened. He was about to shout but was kicked in the face by Man Bao, and Chang Yu, who grabbed the whip, also kicked his wrist severely, and immediately snatched the whip over. The people outside only saw the 3rd child go to lift the curtain, and then the next moment, he flew backwards and fell to the ground with an ouch. The 5 people who were standing lazily stood up straight, and when they looked up, they saw 2 girls getting out of the car with their heads lowered. As soon as the taller wrist turned, the whip slapped the 3rd child who fell to the ground, and she sneered, "Bitch, dare to kidnap me, auntie, don't open your dog. See if you deserve it. Grandma, the 3rd one has a hole in your eye, why don't you give medicine?" That's what he said. The man in the lead still hurried forward to grab the 2 of them, while the others were tall and big, and they jumped on the carriage after 2 quick steps. But Chang Yu was not cowardly. The whip in his hand turned in the air like he had eyes, and slapped it directly towards his face. The man didn't expect Chang Yu's whip to be so good, so he had to turn over and lower his head to dodge, but then he stopped, and the whip that had been thrown followed closely, and slapped him directly in the eye. There was a blood stain in an instant, and the eyes were sore. Laugh and cry. When I write the next chapter, I feel that this chapter is not very useful. Okay, see you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2003. He let out an ah and said angrily, "What are you still doing? Grab these 2 little hooves." Man Bao had already poured out the contents of the bottle while Chang Yu was whipping his whip, and threw it directly at them. They thought it was a hidden weapon and wanted to avoid them, but Man Bao seemed to know where they were going to hide. It was better if they didn't hide. As soon as they hid, something slammed into their face, but it didn't hit them in the face. Also hit the body. As soon as something hit the face, body, or the ground, it shattered immediately, and then a strange smell suddenly rose up and rushed in front of the other 2 men in front. The whole world was turned upside down, and at the same time. Unable to suppress the nausea and dullness in his chest, he immediately threw himself forward. Chang Yu took a step back in disgust, and slapped them directly on top of them in disgust. The 2 women who were about to rush up from behind reacted even more. One of them thumped directly on the man in the lead, and vomited directly on him. Then Chang Yu finally smelled that smell, but maybe because she had a bitter pill under the tip of her tongue, she smelled that smell, which made her feel nauseated, but she wouldn't faint. She immediately took out the handkerchief full of treasures in her sleeve to cover her mouth and nose, but her right hand still kept going, standing in the car and kicking these people who fell to the ground. "You are dishonest, calling you kidnappers, telling you to dare to drag this princess." In the silent alley, only the sound of Chang Yu's whipping and the constant wailing and vomiting of lying on the ground could be heard. Man Bao covered his nose and took 2 steps back, with a look of disgust on his face. Seeing that Chang Yu had torn people's clothes and was covered in blood, he wanted to get out of the car and give them an electric baton. but she looked at what they vomited on the ground and disliked it very much. She didn't bother to go down anymore, she just poured out the remaining pills in the bottle and smashed them all directly on them. The few people who had some strength in the first place just became weak, and they couldn't lift up any strength at all. A woman was so disgusted that she rolled her eyes and twitched twice before fainting. Not to mention Man Bao, Chang Yu was startled, she retracted the whip and stopped beating. She asked Man Bao hesitantly, "This, won't you die?" Man Bao also hesitated, "This, probably not, this pill will only make you feel weak, nausea, vomiting, and hallucinations, and it won't kill you, right?" That said, Man Bao didn't want to be killed, so he whipped his horse and drove the carriage aside first, and then dragged San Niangzi in the carriage to the door of the car. She originally wanted to move her down, but Chang Yu disliked her as a human trafficker and refused to help. And San Niangzi was too heavy, and when Man Bao dragged her to the car door and tried to help her down slowly, one of them failed to hold her steady, and she fell to the ground with a thump from the car. Man Bao retracted his hand and looked at Chang Yu, who was standing under the car. "I said I didn't mean it, do you believe it?" Chang Yu couldn't help laughing with the whip, and nodded happily, "I believe it." So Man Bao jumped out of the carriage, checked it, and was relieved to see that she just touched a bag on her forehead, so she dragged her two hands to the side a little. She then went to drag the other two women who had rolled their eyes, but they had a lot of vomit, smelly and dirty. Man Bao covered his mouth and nose with a handkerchief with his left hand, grabbed one of the other's feet with his right hand and went there dragged. The other party's head slammed on the bluestone slab and made a thumping sound. Chang Yu looked at it from a distance and thought that the other party might not want to drag Man Bao that much. Man Bao dragged the two of them aside, then pinched his mouth and looked at it, and found that the vomit did not block his breathing, so he threw his hands away and ignored them. And she didn't drag the four men lying on the ground over there. They looked strong and strong. She threw all the pills down because she wanted them to stand up. Only then did Man Bao and Chang Yu stand at the vent and exhale. Chang Yu had just looked around and found that no one in the alley didn't say anything, not even 2 or 3 families nearby. They probably all went to the street to celebrate the festival. In other words, the house here was originally empty. Chang Yu asked, "What should I do?" After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "How about we take a look at the people in the car?" The two walked towards the 2 carriages parked on the side. Before opening the curtain, she let Keek see it, and all the people inside were unconscious. She opened the curtain and saw a lot of girls sitting there. There were 4 in the first car and 5 in the second car. They were all girls from 5 to 9 years old. Pretty. One of them was dressed in silk and satin, and at first glance he seemed to be from a wealthy family. After seeing their faces, Chang Yu picked up the whip and went back to stand far away and whipped the 4 men who had not completely fainted. Several whips were directed at their faces and eyes, and the whipping was done. 2 lashes left the flesh torn apart, and at first glance it was terribly miserable. Man Bao didn't stop her. She got into the car and felt their pulse, and she was relieved that they were all just taking the Menghan medicine. After thinking about it, she took it out from her sleeve pocket, took out a bottle, poured out a dozen small pills, and stuffed 2 directly into their mouths. Chang Yu was so happy that he turned around and saw that. He ran up and asked, "Why do you have so many pills on you?" Man Bao said, "Self-defense. These are the pills that she has made over the years. They are all stored in the space. Many of them expire immediately after they are not used. Some can be taken out." It was a bit strange to have her make pills that were placed in the space, so most of them were thrown away after the expiration date. The rest is for the self-defense of Thura and the others who always go out. Man Bao said, "I have been carrying it for a long time, and this is the first time I have used it." The bitter medicine in Chang Yu's mouth has all been dissipated, and now she feels a little sweet in her mouth, and a little cold, which is strangely delicious, so she asked, "The pills just now? Any more?" Man Bao said, "That's not a pill, it's a refreshing pill with mint added." She said, "I'm tired of reading. When I really don't want to read, I take one, and I feel refreshed." Chang Yu looked terrified. "Do you all read like this?" "It's alright, senior brother Bai still thinks it's pretty good. Chiener just asked me for a purse to eat as a snack. This is the most commonly used one, not only for her, but also for Bai Shan and Bai Erlang. And occasionally she will give Zhou Lixu some. It's a pity that Yin Or and Lu Huan didn't like it, otherwise she could exchange a little money." Bai Shan and the others never paid for this ball. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2004. Chang Yu moved her tongue and realized the sweet taste. Basically, she couldn't eat the bitterness before, so she almost forgot the bitterness, so she stretched out her hand and said, "Then give me another pill." Man Bao gave her the purse. Chang Yu poured one out, put it in her mouth and narrowed her eyes with bitterness. She said dissatisfiedly, "Can't we get rid of this bitter taste and leave only the sweet and cold taste?" Man Bao also took one and said, "Okay, but I don't want to do it. It's all sweet, and you want to sleep if you eat it. You are so scary, I don't even want to be friends with you." The two of them leaned on the carriage to talk. Later, when they got tired of standing, they jumped into the carriage and sat down, with their legs swaying. The horse holding the carriage snorted, and after moving their legs, they could only stand bored. Chang Yu asked, "When will they wake up, or I'll be here to guard you, and you go to the street to find the yamen." "That won't work," Man Bao said vaguely with a pill in his mouth. "What if you run into bad guys again after I leave? You are much more important than these bad guys." "Then what should I do, waiting for someone to come?" Man Bao looked at the time and said, "Wait a little longer, they will all wake up in a quarter of an hour, and then we will drive all three carriages to the street." "Then what will they do?" Chang Yu pointed to the people lying on the road. After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "Throw it in the car and take it away together." Chang Yu said with a look of disgust, "No, they are so dirty, smelly, and disgusting, I don't want to ride with them." So Man Bao turned to look behind the car. Chang Yu followed and looked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Man Bao took out the handkerchief from her sleeve again. This time, she did not fold it, but unfolded it and tied it behind her head, so that she could cover her mouth and nose without using her hands. She rolled up her sleeves and said, "Don't you want to ride with them?" Man Bao stepped forward and untied the man's belt directly. She took a look at it, it was not very long, and then took off the coat. Because it was too dirty, she left it alone with a look of disgust. Chang Yu watched with the whip, and followed with a look of disgust. Man Bao took off the belts and coats of the 6 people, and the people in the car also woke up one after another. The eldest woke up first. When they saw the people in the car, they looked horrified and waited to lift the curtain of the car. Seeing Chang Yu and Zhou Man outside, especially seeing the 6 people lying on the ground with blood-stained skin and flesh, they screamed "Ah dash!" Chang Yu was taken aback by them, and she slapped her whip on the carriage. She said angrily, "What's the name? I'm scared of this princess. Since I wake up, I'll come down and help." The girls huddled together and shivered, and no one dared to get out of the car or scream, but a few were young and timid and cried. Man Bao straightened up and said, "Why are you scaring them? They are still stunned after being kidnapped." So she turned her head and looked at the girls who woke up kindly and said, "Don't be afraid, do you know that you have been abducted and sold?" The girls half shook their heads and half nodded. Those who nodded were aware that they were hugged by someone covering their mouths and noses in the wrong eye. People around them didn't believe them when they cried, and they were dragged away by the tough guy. So they know that they have been photographed by Hanako. I don't know, and I don't know why they followed people away in a daze. Now I think about it, I'm still in a daze, but I subconsciously feel that it was a relative at home who took them away. Man Bao sighed and said with a sad face, "We were all photographed by Pei Wazi. They are going to sell us to the mountains, then gouge out our eyes and chop off our brothers and feet for stewed meat. This is what all adults like to scare children, and everyone has grown up listening to it, so their faces are even paler." Man Bao waved and said, "But it doesn't matter, now we beat them all down, come on, help me and tie them all up, or it won't be good for them to wake up soon." Because Joe Man was kind and hated Pai Hanako, the girls climbed out of the car even though they were afraid, and went to help tie the belt and coat. Then the 12 little girls dragged the 7 people behind each of the 3 cars, tied their hands, and tied the other end to the car. Chang Yu walked back and forth with a whip, like a princess who was patrolling her own territory. Well, she was originally a princess. 2 people were tied to the back of a carriage, and Man Bao checked the knot and felt it was strong, so everyone stood in front of the carriage. Man Bao asked them, "Who among you will drive the carriage?" The girls shook their heads together. Most people do not have a horse-drawn carriage at home, and a few have a horse-drawn carriage but only ride in a car. No way, Man Bao could only order the eldest little girl and said, "Then I will drive a car in front, and you will sit in the back of the carriage, don't be afraid, just let the carriage follow the car in front of me. It's just that the directions of the 3 carriages and the direction they are going are still opposite." Man Bao, the only one who can drive a carriage, can only turn the carriage around herself, but she is not very skilled in business. The people who were watching, not to mention the 11 little girls, even Princess Changjia was terrified. When all 3 carriages were turned around, she dispatched people to get on the carriage. She drove the first carriage, and the second carriage was a 9-year-old girl. She was the only one who had led the cow, and the latter one was Princess Changjia. Although she has not learned to drive a carriage, she can ride a horse. But as soon as she hit the road, she realized that driving a carriage was not the same as riding a horse. After a while, the girl's screams came from the alley, stopping, stepping, going to step on. "Aya, the car in front is too slow, I want to step on people." The car went crooked. Then there was an exclamation of awe, and the people who were dragged away by the carriage felt the burning pain in their backs and the pulling force on their hands, and finally most of them woke up, and then there was a scream. But after a while, there was a scream that resounded for a long time, because a horse in the middle car really stepped on a person's foot, but soon he lifted his foot forward, and Man Bao threw the scream when he heard the scream. After flicking the whip, the carriage quickly ran forward a little, and then there were 3 screams. Man Bao couldn't help but shouted behind him, "You guys slow down." When Chang Yu heard this, he shouted from the air, "Slow, slow, my car is about to catch up, hurry up." Everyone was noisily moving forward, walking half a street, and finally met someone who was at home. When they heard this tragic voice, some people couldn't help but quietly poke their heads out to look. As soon as Man Bao saw the person, he called, "Hey, uncle, come and help me, we caught the trafficker." No one dared to go out for a while, who knows if it is true or false, what if it is false, and after deceiving them out of the city, they rob them instead. But usually there are guards patrolling in the square. What about the guards tonight? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2005. The guards were all temporarily seconded to the lively city to maintain law and order, so they walked all the way to a place with lanterns. There were many people living here, and there were some stalls. They heard miserable things from a distance. As soon as the sound was heard, someone looked over here with a probe. Man Bao and the others were sweating profusely while controlling the car. Seeing these people was like seeing a savior, and immediately shouted, "Help, help me." They didn't see the few people who were being dragged away behind the car, but when they saw the little girl driving the car calling for help, the people with a sense of justice immediately rushed forward together. Seeing that someone was finally willing to help them, Man Bao immediately rushed behind and shouted, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop. The little girl in the back immediately restrained the horse when she heard it, and Chang Yu followed closely. Without noticing for a while, she immediately restrained the horse with a direct sound, but it was too late, and a man behind the second car screamed, "Stand up!" When Chang Yu heard this, she wanted to pull the horse aside, but accidentally stepped on the other one. In a fit of rage, she threw the rope and jumped out of the car and said, "I'm not rushing." The man's calf was always being stepped on by the horse's hoof. Fortunately, he didn't step on the bone. He only stepped on a little meat, but it was also very painful. Chang Yu jumped out of the car and pointed at him directly with the whip. "If you call again, my aunt will give you a whip, believe it or not." The trafficker immediately clenched his mouth and did not dare to call again. He didn't think that being whipped would be more painful than being trampled on by a horse, but he was afraid that the horse would be frightened as soon as she was whipped, and if it rushed forward. The two traffickers who were tied behind were all faceless and dared not call again. And the people who ran towards them finally came to the front. They saw the people dragging behind the carriage, and they looked at the girls driving with a bad look for a while. Man Bao immediately explained, "They are all human traffickers. If they caught us, they would have their eyes gouged out. We managed to escape. Brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunties, would you help us report to an official?" So everyone looked at the person lying on the ground covered in blood, and their eyes were not good. Immediately someone went to find the clerk. At this time, the crowd was finally evacuated, and the guards and palace servants who were mixed in the crowd also came out in embarrassment to join Bai Shan and the others. As soon as the two sides met, they asked, "Where's the princess?" Bai Erlang, who had been hiding behind a stall, saw that the street in front of him was a little loose, and everyone could walk normally, and immediately pulled Mingda back to find someone. So Bai Shan and the guards looked at each other, and when they were sweating coldly, Bai Erlang took Mingda's hand and came back. "I'm scared to death, you are all here." When they saw Princess Mingda, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Goodbye to her, her hair was just a little messy. The whole person was fine, and she didn't seem to be frightened. Princess Mingda's maid immediately stepped forward to support her and whispered, "Princess, shall we find a place for you to freshen up?" Bai Shan had already asked, "Where are Man Bao and Princess Changjia?" Bai Erlang said, "They should be fine. After all, Man Bao has always been reliable." The magistrate Tang also thought the same, but he hurriedly asked someone to look for him, but instead of calling him the princess, he could only call someone by Zhou Man's name. With so many people being diverted, will they have already left the street? Bai Shan looked at the crowd that had gradually dispersed and the injured who were being carried aside because of injuries, and pursed his lips and said, "Even if she goes out at first, she will turn back again. She is a doctor." Bai Shan remembered something, and immediately said to a guard, "Go back to our Bai's lampshade immediately to see if they have returned there." Tang County Magistrate also immediately sent people to look for them at various intersections, making sure to find them. But in less than 2/4 of an hour, all parties had a message back, "I can't see them going back to the Beijia lantern." There was a call at the 3 intersections, but no one answered. 4 intersections too. Neither 5 intersections. Then one of the guards came back with something that had been trampled into disbelief, and said in a cold sweat, "This seems to be the barbecue carried by Zhou Xiao and Princess Changjia." Tang County Magistrate turned his head to look at the wounded beside him, and asked with a livid face, "Are all the wounded here tonight? Are there any dead people?" The officer immediately said, "There are no dead people, but there are 2 serious injuries. They are still being rescued." The doctor from Baikatang said that it is unlikely that they will be rescued. He immediately said, "But both are men." Bai Shan said, "They'll be fine, they must have gone somewhere. Man Bao is still with his little father-in-law by his side, so he will be fine." Bai Shan Zheng pondered, and suddenly a yeoman came running and reported, "Sir, people who have lost their children are making trouble in the county yamen, and now they want to traffic people and see their children. There are more than one family who lost their children, there are 5 in total, but not all were lost on this road." Master Tang and Bai Shan couldn't help but look at each other, and both had a bad premonition in their hearts. Those traffickers can't be so lucky, eh? Master Tang felt that his heart was not very good, and he immediately said, "Come on, block the city gate." "No, no, no, you can't block it, go back to the county government, and send out the old guys like Lao Lu and let them go to the 3 cities. The gate is guarded, let them show their tricks, and everyone who goes out from the city gate is closely watched by the county, as long as they feel suspicious, they will be detained." Yes, the clerk took the order and left. Tang County Magistrate walked in place, and Mingda asked, "Do you want to go back to the palace to dispatch people?" No, Tang County Magistrate refused, and after reconciling, he smiled with Princess Mingda and said, "Your Highness Princess, the minister's Shangguan is Lord Yin, and he not only has Jingzhou Mansion, but also the Imperial Guard. It's good to send troops to find him, you don't have to go back to the palace to find someone." Going back to the palace to find someone, I don't know if people can find him, but he may not be able to keep his head first. He might as well use the people from Jingzhou Mansion and the Imperial Guard to find them first. It is faster to find Yin Li to transfer troops than to go back to the palace to transfer troops. But Magistrate Tang pondered, these traffickers may not leave tonight. If they arrest people tonight, he prefers where they will hide and leave the city after the wind has passed for a while. But the capital was so big, where would he go to find their hiding place? Magistrate Tang began to pick up in his mind the various prostitutes and hooligans under his rule, and they might know something. Tang County Magistrate's eyes flashed fiercely, and he was thinking about whether everyone should not have a good time this mid-autumn festival. A janitorial guard trotted over on horseback. "I found Lord Josiao, Princess Changjiao, and human traffickers." Thinking of the miserable appearance of those traffickers, the guards lowered their heads and said, "Sir, let's go take a look." Those traffickers looked like they were about to die. I'm afraid they were too late to even have a confession. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2006. Of course, he didn't say this, so when the Tang County magistrates rode their horses and ran to the side of the East City, where there were not many stalls, what they saw was Princess Changjiao. The whip whipped the person on the ground twice, and said angrily, "How dare you say that you are good people, and that we frame you? Does Grandma Ben need to frame you?" Not only did Joe Man not persuade her, but he encouraged her on the side, "Well done. My parents said that traffickers should be slashed with 1,000 swords, so we only took a few whips." Tang County Magistrate was not in a hurry, he slowly slowed down the speed of the horse, but Bai Shan and the others behind him were in a hurry, and they ran over him directly and shouted from a distance, "Man Bao." Man Bao and Chang Yu turned their heads together, and when they saw them, they immediately felt that their backers were coming, so they waved and shouted, "We are here, here we are." The 2 guards who were left behind stopped the angry people next to them and breathed a sigh of relief. It's good to come, and it's good to come. The few people on the ground are so simple and honest, they snot and snot. With tears, he said that he was wronged, and that Joe Man and the others were powerful people, and he deliberately arrested them for fun. Most of the people watching now believe them. There is no way, Princess Changjiao is too strong and sturdy, and the traffickers who are dragged look too pitiful. There are only 3 people in their team, and one of them has gone to report, leaving only the 2 of them here to protect. They didn't dare to call out the princess name. Bai Shan and the others ran up on their horses. After jumping off the horse, they pushed aside the onlookers and stepped forward. They saw the 7 people who were curled up on the ground and had been beaten miserably. One of them was a woman whose clothes were half torn off. They immediately looked away and asked the 2 of them, "Why did you come here?" Man Bao immediately complained, "We were caught by traffickers." "Nonsense," Chang Yu retorted, raising his chin arrogantly, "it's clear that we went deep into the tiger's den and caught the traffickers." Man Bao was stunned for a moment, then nodded and changed his mouth, "Yes, we recognized them as human traffickers, so we went deep into the tiger's den and caught them all in one go." Tang County Magistrate got off his horse, with a large group of imperial guards and yamen behind him, and with a wave of his hand, he separated the people who were unwilling to disperse from them. He snorted and asked, "Are you proud of taking risks?" Man Bao immediately lowered his head in a guilty conscience. Princess Changjiao immediately said, "This princess is Lu Jianbuping to help out, and we have the confidence to take them down. Don't you think they are lying down now? Why aren't you proud?" Mingda called out in disapproval, "Sister, the son of a daughter can't sit down in the hall." Princess Changjiao, if you were here at that time, you would definitely not say such a thing. Man Bao nodded quietly. After thinking about it, Mingda stopped talking. Magistrate Tang was a little tired, but he could only bow to Princess Changjiao first, then turned his head and asked the group of little girls who were huddled together, "Who are you 2 girls?" 2 of the girls immediately stood up. Crowd. The 2 little girls were also startled, looked at each other and said, "I'm the second girl." County Magistrate Tang, which of you 2 was lost over the main street? The shorter girl on the right took a step forward. Seeing that she was only about 7 years old, the Magistrate Tang reached out and patted her on the head, comforting, "Your parents are waiting in the county office. How did you get kidnapped?" As soon as the little girl heard her parents, tears came out immediately, and the fear that had been pressing all came together. She closed her eyes and burst into tears, sobbing and saying, "I hold my mother's hand, hold it all the time, but as soon as I looked up, my mother was not my mother. I didn't know her, but she said she was my mother, and put a smelly handkerchief over my nose. I felt hugged, and then nothing got it, woo woo woo." Seeing her crying, the Tang County Magistrate couldn't help it, and immediately pushed her to Joe Man, "Hurry up and coax." Then he went to ask the next one, that is, how they were abducted. The little girl has been thinking about it all the way, so it is very clear at this time. Tang County Magistrate can answer the question. Most of them are walking and walking, holding people's hands and walking with them, and when they find out, ask them it was too late to find my parents. Others were even more confused. "I can't find my mother, she said it was my aunt, who came out of the same village as my mother, and knew where my mother was. I thought she was lovable, and knew my mother, I just followed. More, he came up to hug me, and when I called, he hit me, saying that I was disobedient, thinking about buying delicious food, and didn't want to go home. I said I didn't know him, but no one believed me." The more they talked, the more aggrieved the children became. They would definitely be beaten by their parents when they went back. When they thought about it, they felt even more sad, so they asked one to cry, and within a quarter of an hour, all the 11 little girls started to cry. The older ones still know how to press down, so they just lowered their heads and cried softly. When they were younger, they closed their eyes and opened their mouths to the sky, and the tears flowed down like spring water, not to mention the Tang Magistrate. Bao and the others were so frightened that they hurried to persuade them. Chang Yu also howled twice, "Don't cry, didn't you rescue you? Why are you crying?" The girls cried even more sadly. They were driving the carriage just now, and the horse stepped on someone. The crowd of onlookers also exploded. This is really a human trafficker. People look kind and kind, but what I said just now is pitiful. It turned out to be a human trafficker. Who is the most hated criminal in the world? That's human traffickers. Those who rebel are not as hateful as they are. Someone spat in the middle and scolded, stealing people's children, cutting off their children and cutting off their grandchildren, these people should be cut with 1,000 cuts. Kill them. Seeing the crowd rioting, the magistrate Tang hurriedly asked someone to stop them. The girls were shocked when they saw the adults were angry, and the younger ones cried even more loudly. Hearing the sound getting louder and louder, Chang Yu wanted to whip the whip to scare them again, but Man Bao suddenly raised his head and looked behind her. Tang magistrate and others also heard the movement, and raised their heads to look, and saw the end of the street. The prince came over with a team of guards. The crowd was immediately driven to both sides. The prince rode on his horse and looked down at them. Seeing that both Mingda and Chang Yu were standing well, they didn't seem to be in trouble, mainly because Chang Yu was still carrying a whip. There was still a lot of blood on the whip, and there were 7 miserable people lying on the ground. He frowned, first glared at Chang Yu secretly, and then said to Tang County Magistrate, "How many people collided with the princess?" Tang County Magistrate was about to report, and after listening to the prince's question, he was right, so he responded. The prince touched his body, but couldn't find the money, so he looked aside. Wu Gonggong is about to present a purse. The prince dropped the money bag, looked down at the miserable 7 people and said, "It's private." Crowd. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2007. The money bag was aimed at the traffickers, and it happened to fall on one person. Man Bao was the closest, so she quickly picked it up and shouted, "No, Your Highness, it's not us bullying them, it's them bullying us. No, yes, they bully the people of the whole capital, they are human traffickers, we are brave and righteous, and it is not right. This official is a court official, and Princess Changjiao is a princess. It is right to protect the safety of the country, the people, and property." She glanced at the purse in her hand and felt that it was quite heavy, so she said, "How about you reward us?" Crowd. Is this the key? Is this the key? After Man Bao finished speaking, the prince's expression changed, and his eyes were different when he looked at the 7 people on the ground. Is this a trafficker? Everyone nodded together, and the magistrate Tang took care of the crown prince's face and added, "Xiaoguan is about to take people down." After waving their hands, the yamen stepped forward to release their hands and pulled them up. Only then did everyone see that their backs were covered in blood, which should have been dragged out from the bluestone slab. After all, they didn't even wear a coat. The prince couldn't help but look at Chang Yu. Chang Yu caught the prince's sight and raised his chin proudly. The prince looked away. Forget it, it was the one who beat the person, not the one who was beaten. He only dismounted at this time, and he also carried a whip in his hand. With the whip, he raised the face of a trafficker to look at it, and asked the magistrate of Tang, "Why did Gu hear that the princesses are missing?" He was drinking with someone when he heard the sound of drums. The drums in the capital are not free to beat, but only when there is danger. For example, where there is a fire, it is necessary to put out the fire, or where there is a vicious event that cannot be communicated in time, the drum will be played. So when he heard the drums, he asked people to ask, and the guards came back and said that there seemed to be a congestion, and they might be trampled. He didn't take it to heart at first. Every year during the Mid-Autumn Festival, there will be a traffic jam. There are 2 county magistrates in charge of this kind of thing, and Yin Li is in charge of it. But after a few drinks, someone came to report, and the 2 princesses seemed to be gone. Only then did he take people out, but there were too many people over there, so he had to take a detour. People were still in front of them and heard people making noises that the powerful people in front were grabbing people for fun, and dragging people with carriages to play. The prince was curious as soon as he heard it, who is so arrogant under the emperor's feet? Even the prince didn't dare to drag people to play in the street. As soon as he arrived, he saw Chang Yu carrying the whip, and there were 7 people lying on the ground covered in blood. The wounds could be seen from the whip. He wasn't annoyed that he had made a mistake, he just wanted to know how these traffickers got into Chang Yu's hands. Seeing that the prince didn't care, Man Bao tucked the purse into his sleeve and said, "We didn't lose it, we've been here all the time, but there are too many people on the street, and you can't see each other with one wrong eye." Ming Dafa felt his heart and nodded immediately. "Yes, there are a lot of people outside tonight, brother, we just ate a family's roast mutton that is very delicious. Would you like to try it?" Taking advantage of the prince's inattention, Mingda gave Chang Yu a wink, and Chang Yu instantly understood that if the prince's elder brother knew that they were almost lost tonight, he would definitely not take them out next time. She immediately chimed in, "It's really delicious." After she finished speaking, she came back to her senses and asked Man Bao, "Where's the barbecue we bought?" "It's gone," Man Bao said dejectedly, "there are so many people, it's good that I can catch you as soon as you get crowded, the barbecue will naturally fall." Chang Yu was heartbroken and said, "Go back and buy 2 copies. Seeing them say a few words, the Tang County magistrate pulled the topic away, wishing they would leave quickly, and immediately pointed to a few guards, "You protect the crown prince and the 2 princesses, and this time take a good look at the lanterns, and the others will follow me." These people are escorted back. Then he apologized to the prince, saying that he couldn't accompany him any longer, and he had to send these rescued children back to their parents. The prince waved his hand to let him retire, and did not let him stay in the imperial guard. He brought a large team of guards, plus the people who were supposed to protect and serve Mingda and Changjiao. There was no shortage of people at all. "Okay." Magistrate Tang quietly breathed a sigh of relief, responded with a smile, and Bai Shan looked at each other calmly, then led the people and 3 carriages away. The guards also dispersed the lively people, and everyone heard now that this is the prince and the princess. Although the prince and the princess are strange, but at the feet of the emperor, they are not without a chance to meet, nor are they the emperor and the queen. So everyone watched them curiously, staring at their faces one by one, and then they were driven away with satisfaction, thinking that they could brag for 3 days after they went back. When the people left, the prince glanced at them. After sweeping their faces, he snorted and turned to go to the door. "Let's go, buy the meat and go back to the palace." Obviously, it's not that he doesn't know anything, he just pretends he doesn't know anything so as not to make a big fuss. Mingda and Chang Yu felt regretful and bought time for themselves. "Brother, if we want to take a look at the fire phoenix, we can just take a look under the lamp holder, just take a look." Bai Shan said, "It's rare to come out. If you don't play to your heart's content, this chance to come out will be wasted." Man Bao also said, "His Royal Highness, I smell the alcohol on your body, you can't drink more, why don't you go to appreciate the lanterns with us? What's the reward for the lamp?" Man Bao said, "In addition to the lanterns, there are also moon cakes. I heard that there are a lot of new moon cakes in the light shed of the dim sum shop. So everyone has to take a look." The prince got on his horse first and followed them to the barbecue stall. The stall was not on the congested road, so he escaped, and Manbao and the others came to buy again. He was very happy, and he didn't know that there was a traffic jam ahead. He thought they didn't have enough to eat and came back to buy it, so he worked very hard. Baked them 30 of what they ordered. At first, he roasted a serving of the prince and thought it was not bad, so he simply asked, "Would you like to go to the palace to roast meat for Gu?" Everyone looked at the prince in surprise. The stall owner also looked at the prince in surprise and tremblingly wanted to kneel down. The prince waved his hand and said, "Continue the barbecue, you only need to say whether you want it or not." The stall owner asked cautiously, "His Royal Highness, I want to go to the palace, do I want to go?" "Prince, I was asked to be the cook, but I didn't want you to serve me personally, so why should I go to power?" The stall owner said, "Thank you, Your Highness, but I won't go there. I think it's good to open a shop. Crowd, then why do you ask if you want to go to castration? The stall owner said embarrassedly, I'm just a little curious. Crowd. The prince thought this man was a bit stupid, but fortunately he didn't agree, otherwise he wouldn't want it. He was almost done eating 7 or 8 servings, so he simply dropped the sign and reached out to Zhou Man. Man Bao looked at his hand in confusion. The prince said with an expressionless face, Qianbao, pay. Man Bao paused for a while before taking out the warm purse and putting it in his hand. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 2008. The prince followed them to Huofengguang and walked to the place that was crowded before. The injured people have been carried to various hospitals by the yamen, but there are still many people here, but this time, people come from all directions. People have filled the vacancies here, so it is lively again. Tang County Magistrate learned a lesson this time. 2 yamen are placed at each intersection to control the flow of people. If there are too many, they will stop some, either return or wait until someone goes out before they can enter again. But Bai Shan knew the tragic situation here before, especially the 2 people who were trampled the most. When they were lifted out, they only breathed a sigh of relief. So he has been a little silent. Man Bao noticed that he was in a low mood, and slowly walked behind him. What's the matter with you? Bai Shan Chong smiled at her, stretched out his hand to hold her hand and walked together. It's all right, I'm just fascinated by things. He knew that Man Bao and the others must have gone out early and didn't see it. The matter has already happened, let her have a good Mid-Autumn festival tonight, and let's talk about it tomorrow. Man Bao looked at him twice, and when he saw that he didn't mean to say, he shook his hand and moved forward. The lamp base and the fire phoenix on the inner city gate are made by the Ministry of Industry. The lanterns on the wings will also rotate. Because the colors of the lanterns are different and they are very layered, once they are rotated, they are like spreading their wings and flying high. Nice. Not to mention the country bumpkins like Man Bao and the others, even Princess Mingda and Princess Changjia were stunned and exclaimed, it's not obvious from the palace, but here, it's so beautiful. The prince couldn't help but nodded. The heavy-hearted Bai Shan also stared blankly for a while. There is a large open space under the fire phoenix and the lamp holder. There are no stalls here. There are guards by soldiers, only for tourists to enjoy. The place they went in just now was different. It seems that the county government has split up the road ahead of time to prevent people from wandering around. And swimming out from the fire phoenix is a lamp shed. There are many lanterns hanging on the lantern, and some lanterns have riddles, and those who guess correctly will be rewarded. For families like the Bai family and the Yin family, their lantern prizes are lanterns with lantern riddles and a package of gifts. The gifts include blessing rice and blessing cakes, choose one of them. In addition to the large families who will set up lanterns here to have fun with the people and pray for their families, there are also major shops. Ji Shitang also set up a lantern here, and the gifts are some packaged medicines, which are also very popular. But Man Bao and the others did not go to the light shed of Ji Shitang, but specifically aimed at the light shed of the dim sum shop. The light shed in the dim sum shop not only has prizes, but also merchandise. Man Bao and the others squeezed to the front, and found that there were only a dozen lanterns hanging on them, and they were all difficult riddles. Several people whispered together, Xiern loves heavy and pretty. What is this? Man Bao also scratched his ears and scratched his cheeks, and asked the most knowledgeable prince among them, do you know, your highness? Prince, does Gu look like someone who knows? Ask him what's wrong, ask him about the text. Man Bao said, but aren't you the one who has eaten the most dim sum among us? The prince glanced at her, and he flicked the purse around his fingers and said, want to eat? Just buy it. For him, why bother thinking about something that money can buy? Bai Shan asked thoughtfully, is it Shui Maniang? The stall owner, who was buying dim sum and collecting money, heard that, raised his head and glanced at Bai Shan and smiled. Why does this gentleman say it's Shui Mei Niang? As soon as Bai Shan heard him ask this question, he knew that he had guessed correctly. He smiled and said, Ziyang Izhong should be the word for Mei. This whole sentence sounds like a pretty girl, so I guess it is Shui Mei Niang. I don't know if I guessed it right. That's right, he laughed. Originally, this riddle shouldn't have been written like this, but my kid was naughty and said that the riddle I gave can be guessed by others, so I wrote this one at random. I guessed it? Chang Yu and the others had a bad premonition. The remaining dozen or so lanterns are not all mysteries from your son, right? The stall owner nodded embarrassedly. Yes, so, in fact, the dim sum left behind are all common, and people will know it at a glance, so my son changed it. That's what he said, but everyone still took a guess. But the person who asked the question obviously wanted to deliberately embarrass people, and sometimes the riddles were only a thread in the answer, which was especially difficult to guess. Bai Shan and Man Bao read the most, and they racked their brains to come up with another one. Mingda and Bai Er could also think about it, and even the prince could talk. Only Chang Yu, even what sentence did the word they say come from? But she had no idea which book the sentence was from. Whoever reads a book and memorizes the sentences in it, shouldn't they just put down the book and forget it? Why even remember which book it's from? She stared at the lantern riddle above, and simply began to read the dessert names she knew: osmanthus cake, emerald bean cake, chestnut cake, two-color bean cake, bean paste roll, golden cake roll, lotus seed cake. After being stunned for a moment, the stall owner couldn't help but say ouch, and hurriedly stopped. Little lady, that's not how you guess the answer. He couldn't help laughing and said, if you guess like you can't help people with this lantern riddle. Even if there are new products in my store, most of the dim sum names are known to everyone. Mingda and the others couldn't help pursing their lips, so they stopped guessing and asked the store owner to give them the Shui Mei Niang and walnut cake they had guessed. The stall owner breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly took out the 2 lanterns they guessed for them, and then took out 2 boxes for them. He smiled and said, it's all fresh snacks made today, but it's not hot. Fortunately, Shui Mei Niang can eat cold, and the little lady and the little gentleman can taste it. A box of dim sum is not much, after all, it is just for a good luck. There are only 6. Man Bao and the others divided it up, which was just right, so he covered it with his sleeve and took a bite. Not to mention, it was cool and refreshing. After chewing, it was glutinous and sweet. It was delicious. Man Bao liked it very much, and Bai Shan also thought it was good, so he stepped forward to look at the dim sum on the stall. Let's buy something else and go back and try it out. Do you have any new styles of moon cakes this year? Yes, Lang Jun, please look at this box of moon cakes. There are egg yolks in them. Chang Yu said, I ate egg yolk last year, and I also ate venison. Stall owner, that's incomparable. Who can afford venison to make moon cakes? He said, the egg yolk in my mooncake is double. Everyone glanced at the mooncake as big as a disc, and thought that it was too big to fit 2. Bai Shan said, buy 1. Exactly. After a while, I cut a person to eat a piece, and it was considered a celebration of reunion. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2009. The people who stayed behind and waited for the barbecue quickly caught up with the barbecue, so everyone went to the shed of Bai's house together. Except for Mr. Zhuang, who went to meet his friends, everyone else was there. It was obvious that Thursday Lang had just returned from the outside with his wife and children. He poured himself a glass of water before saying, the front is blocked, and it seems that someone has stepped on it. We were originally going to be the champion. There was a lot of fun on the other side of the building, but I couldn't get through it at all, and I was blocked by the yamen on another road, causing me to take a long detour before I came back. Dad, Manbeo, haven't they come yet? Olds Hutu, it's behind you. On Thursday, Lang turned around and saw Manbao running from the opposite street with a happy face. Grandmother Lu, father, mother, I bought mooncakes. The Olds Hutu said, there are some made at home, and you can eat whatever stuffing you want. Why do you still buy them? Of course, the mooncakes are not made by the Zhou family. The Zhou family only makes one type of noodle cake, either baked or baked. But it takes a lot of effort to mold the mooncakes alone, so the Bai family made them and distributed them to everyone. Manbao put it on the table and said, it's not what I paid for. Old Zhou Tiou muttered, what Bai Shan has produced is also wasted. Manbao whispered, the prince came out. At this time, Mrs. Lu had already recognized the prince and the two princesses, and quickly got up. Olds Hutu also saw it, and immediately knelt down. The prince waved his hand, and Manbao quickly supported her father. She smiled and said, Father, the prince doesn't want to reveal his identity, so let's not make too much noise. The old Zhou family did not dare to move. Standing at the back, Shu Youlang quietly raised his head and glanced at the prince, very excited in his heart, but did not dare to come forward and speak. As for the prince, I have something to say after returning to the village. Princess Mingda and the others want to take advantage of the white light shed to freshen up. This is really not difficult. The side and rear of the shed are separated by a screen, and the inside is specially used for grooming. Zheng Shi smiled and led them in to wash up, and the palace maids followed, and quickly redressed the two people whose hair was a little messy before. The prince was waiting outside the lantern shed. He looked sideways at Bai Shan, and said in a vague way, you should think about what happened tonight, and report back to Tang He. It's the same for Tang He. Bai Shan understands that this is to allow them to communicate well in private, so he has to say it, but he can't say everything. After all, the two princesses are in danger in the busy city, and no one, including the prince and the two princesses, will be able to please. And this matter is secret, it is really secret, except for themselves. I am afraid that the guards who are following are not sure whether Princess Changjia was really kidnapped by the traffickers, or whether they went straight to the bottom of the traffickers' nest to save people. In one matter, whether it is good or bad, merit or demerit, it all depends on how the person who reported it responded. Bai Shaniang came down and said that he would communicate with the Tang County magistrate and report the matter easily. Since it is a simple report, it is naturally what the two princesses who went back have to say. At this time, Man Baijan and the two princesses were making confessions in front of the palace maids. This kind of thing is simple. Instead of making up nonsense to deceive your majesty and the queen, we might as well just pick a few and say it. That's not cheating. Chang Yu let the maid comb her hair and asked, what if you ask about the traffickers? The most important thing is this. Although she consciously did good deeds, she also knew that if her father knew about this, she would definitely be punished, and the next time she left the palace was far away. Manbao is very experienced in this. You just say how hateful those traffickers are, how pitiful the abducted girls are, how did you beat them with whips. You can't reveal that the guards were not there at the time. If you don't say it, your majesty will. If you don't ask, he won't know. Mingda thought thoughtfully, I see, we have highlighted the bravery of my sister. The father and the emperor will only be there as guards, and naturally he is not afraid of traffickers hurting people, then this is a pure good thing. Manbao nodded again and again, yes, yes, that's it, let's talk about the delicious barbecue, guess the lantern riddles, and it's so lively outside. This is called reporting good news but not bad news. Your Majesty and the Empress have already worked hard for state affairs, so we don't want to use this to make them worry. Mingda Changjio and Manbao looked at each other, laughed like a little fox, nodded repeatedly and said, "You are right." Zheng Shi, who had led them in and had not yet gone out, couldn't help but said quietly, "So you and Shanbao Erlang have always reported good news instead of bad news." It was only then that Man Bao noticed that Aunt Zheng had been standing in the corner. She blinked, and immediately went to hug her hand. "Aunt Zheng, we never hide anything at home, not to mention that we always follow as long as we go out. I just can't hide it if I want to." Zheng Shi knew that she was only telling half the truth, so she smiled and nodded her forehead. "You." Man Bao giggled. Mingda looked at the person who was waiting on the side and said, "My sister and I are safe tonight. Don't talk about these things if you don't ask them in detail." The palace maids immediately knelt down and responded. In fact, they were all relieved. They followed the princess out but did not follow closely. At that time, the crowd was chaotic, and they couldn't keep up. No matter what the reason was, they were negligent, so now that the princess was willing to cover up, they naturally could not ask for it. So when they finally came out from behind the screen, everyone said goodbye happily in front of the lantern. Bai Erlang handed a lotus lamp to Mingda and said, "I just bought it for you. I heard that the lotus lamp can make wishes. You can make a wish for good health and hang it under the window. Maybe Chang'e in the sky will hear your wish and bless you." Mingda lowered her head slightly, her cheeks flushed slightly. She reached out to take it, and whispered thanks. The prince glanced at Bai Er and said to his two younger sisters, "Let's go, it will be too late if you don't go back to the palace." The guards brought the carriage. Mingda and Chang Yu got on the carriage, waved to Man Bao at the window, and the prince also got on the horse, and then started the journey. When they were far away, Man Bao turned around and opened the barbecue they brought. "Dad, we ate a very delicious roast lamb on the street." But the old Zhutu asked, "Why do I see that Bai Shan is not very happy? You two quarreled." No. Man Bao took the flesh of a lotus leaf and went to Bai Shan, intending to ask if something happened on the main street just now. At this time, Magistrate Tang was still dealing with matters on the main street, and the injured were sent to the hospital. He not only had to appease the families of the injured, but also had to deliver the kidnapped children to their respective parents. As soon as the children were lost, some people came to report to the officials, but some did not, and now the majority did not come, so he had to arrange for the children to live there for the time being, and he would have to find their parents tomorrow. In addition, he has to interrogate these traffickers overnight. These people dare to kidnap so many children at the foot of the capital. Obviously, this kind of thing has not been done once or twice, and he suspects the traffickers who are operating in the capital tonight. Not just them. Therefore, it is necessary to interrogate it as soon as possible. The child cannot be found for more than 2 days, and it is tantamount to looking for it later. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2010. Therefore, as soon as he returned to the county office, he summoned Sanputu, dragged the people into the torture chamber, detain them separately, pry their mouths open, and ask me who there are other accomplices in the capital, or if they know the same as them. Colleagues. He added, first ask where their family members are. Sanputu was slightly surprised. The county magistrate Tang rarely used punishment, and there was no precedent for using the prisoner's family to threaten the prisoner. How could these people make the county magistrate Tang break the precept? Tang county magistrate glanced at him and said, "Why don't you go quickly? Abducting and selling the princess, this is a crime that implicates the 3 clans, and it will be caught later, so it is better to make the best use of it before." The subordinates took the order and left, and then the Tang county magistrate walked to the main hall while thinking about how to report to the emperor after entering the palace the day after tomorrow, so that the mistake he made would appear lighter. Magistrate Tang worked overtime for most of the night, and only lay down on the chair in the office when it was almost dawn. It didn't take long for Bai Shan and the others to find him after he fell asleep. Magistrate Tang got up and sat in a chair for a while before wiping his face and getting up, draw a pot of well water. After washing with the cold well water, he felt refreshed, but his official uniform was wrinkled, like dried vegetables that had been kneaded. Anyway, the county government is now his own person, and he is not particular about it. He goes out after washing his face, and only after going out, he encounters the wise man who was ordered to see him with a food box. Ming Li was not surprised by the sloppiness of his master, but he still said a few words. Master, if Madam knew that you didn't even change your clothes, you would definitely be angry. Magistrate Tang sat on the stone bench in the yard and asked him to put down the food box, then said to the yeoman, please come in. He said to Ming Li again, if you don't tell me, I won't tell you. How would she know? Bai Shanmanbao and Bai Erlang were invited in. Seeing that the magistrate Tang was sitting and having breakfast, they swallowed. The Tang County magistrate froze and stared at them. You didn't eat breakfast. The three shook their heads together. The magistrate Tang was embarrassed for a moment, but he still said tentatively, let's have some food together. It was just that the amount might not be enough. Unexpectedly, the three shook their heads together. No need. Man Bao said, we're going to eat on the street. Bai Shan said, we deliberately don't eat breakfast to save our stomachs. Tang He lowered his head and continued drinking his meat porridge, and asked directly, what are you doing here? Talk about it. The three of them sat down. Bai Shan relayed what the crown prince had said last night, and then said, the two princesses won't go into details. Tang County magistrate expressed doubts about the ability of the two princesses to avoid the most important things. They have no experience, can they hide it? Bai Shandao, it's just a brief explanation. With the prince and the two princesses here, your majesty should not ask in detail. Magistrate Tang nodded, okay. The fact that the two princesses disappeared for a while can be concealed, but the traffickers and people crowded and trampled last night cannot be concealed. Magistrate Tang sighed, one of the two people who were seriously injured died last night, and he died after being carried to the hospital for a while. He was trampled too hard and couldn't be saved. Man Bao's mood also fell, and he asked, is this a man-made disaster? County Magistrate Tang rubbed his forehead and said, I have a lot of cases to do in a while, so I won't leave you anymore, but please tell Mrs. Liu, and I will come to visit when the matter is decided. Bai Shan, visit my grandmother. That's right, Tang County Magistrate said solemnly, I will visit all the houses and shops that set up light sheds in the inner city gate this year. Bai Shan and Man Bao Bai looked at each other, responded in a low voice, and then got up to salute and leave. County Magistrate Tang nodded, by the way, Man Bao, you have done a good job in catching the traffickers, and I will give you the credit when I come back. Man Bao immediately said, don't forget to add Princess Changjia. County Magistrate Tang waved his hand to indicate that he knew it. He glanced at Bai Shan and said, and your credit. In his eyes, Bai Shan's credit last night was more than Joe Man. After all, it was a little later that time, and he didn't know how many people would die, because there were a lot of injured people who were brought out last night. After leaving the county office, the three of them went to lead the horse with Daji in silence, and Bai Erlang asked, should we go to the Hyogyo temple today to serve incense sticks? Man Bao, pray for those people. Bai Erlang said, just give your best. Bai Shan, it's just that we don't often worship the Buddha, and we don't know if the Buddha can answer the oath. Man Bao said, but it's just for peace of mind. Those who believe in Buddhism may not be able to get the blessing of the Buddha. Let's go. The three of them had breakfast under the Hyogyo temple before going up the mountain. This is not the first time they have come to Hyogyo temple, but each time they only play in the downtown area under the mountain gate. Not only because there are a lot of delicious food below, but also a lot of small carved things about Buddhism gathered from all over the world, and various books. So they like to come here to eat and buy some books and fun things after taking a bath. It's just that this time they just glanced at the Buddha ornaments on the booth, and followed the crowd to the mountain. After stepping over the high threshold, they entered the Mahavira hall. The three of them looked up at the Buddha statue almost as high as the roof, and then stepped forward to line up to worship. There are a lot of people coming to offer incense today, so it will take a while. When it was the turn of the three of them stepped forward together, knelt down together, and then looked up at the Buddha and thought about how to make a wish for the person who was injured last night. The three of them solemnly made a wish, then kowtowed, stood up and said, "Do you still have to repay the wish in the future? If the benefactor gets what he wants, he will come to repay it." The three of them turned back together, and saw an old monk in a red cassock standing behind them at some point, looking at them with a smile. Of course, the hope is not for the Buddha, but for the peace of mind of the donors. The three of them don't know who he is, but seeing that he is quite old and kind, the main reason is that the cassock he wears is very good, and the Buddha beads hanging on his hands are also very long and round. At first glance, it is often played and not cheap, yes, so I decided that the other party's identity must not be low, so they bowed and saluted together. Seeing that they were doing Confucian rituals, the old monk couldn't help but smile deepened. He took a step back and asked, "I wonder if the three donors would like to have a meditation in the backyard." Bai Shan and the three were tangled, and politely declined. The invitation of the master should not be rejected, but we are young and don't know much about Buddhism, so we dare not talk about Zen. The old monk smiled and said, "The donor Bai is joking. The views of the three donors on the path of Buddhism should not be weaker than those of Lao Na and others." Bai Shan was surprised that he knew about them, so he couldn't help but look at Man Bao, and then smiled. "This will disturb the master doesn't think we are stupid." Although the three of them didn't know who he was yet, since they were able to call their names, they stood behind them and waited. Obviously they came prepared. They didn't want to hide either, and were curious about what the monk wanted them to do. See you at 9.